It is not often that Terra, the ancient cradle of humanity, is the setting for a Warhammer 40k book. Even less often that the High Lords are any more than just a throwaway line to make a plot line have more punch. In The Emperor's Legion, Chris Raitt brings a whole lot more than expected together for an unforgettable story. All of the considerably dense and dialogue-heavy story is conveyed and seen through three separate characters. Alexei Lev Tyron, who is a Councilarius to the High Lords of Terra in charge of communicating and organizing the High Lords. Although the office is old enough that there is much more that the office allows than simply being a glorified doorkeeper. Tyron will be the unmodified human perspective readers will get to see through, albeit altered by his longer than standard lifespan, and one that has been spent in the highest echelons of Imperial hierarchy. It is his character that the High Lords are introduced and humanized to a degree. Secondly, there's Valerian. His age is unspecified, but his actions and demeanor throughout the book imply that he is a relatively young for a Custodes. Beyond the very rare opportunity of getting a look behind the curtain of the Custodes, Valerian offers a unique understanding of the Imperium due to many factors. His relative youth and isolation in the Imperial Palace makes him invariably naive, making his interactions with the Astartes he runs into very awkward. What he really brings is the unfettered access to an accumulation of knowledge that possibly rivals the Black Library hidden away by the Eldar. It is this deep knowledge that many truths about the Imperium are revealed, and the depths of changes that Millennium have wrought on the Empire of Humanity in the far-flung future. There's also an element of connection with the Master of Mankind that underpins his arc. No better representative of serendipity presents themselves in this narrative than the last of the trio of characters readers will be experiencing the narrative with. Alea is a Knoll Maiden, more commonly known as a Sister of Silence. They are an ancient order that has a rocky and mysterious background with the Imperium. More than twice, they have been informally dismissed with efforts by other factions within the Imperium to decimate them entirely. However, with the galaxy on the precipice of a new age, they are called en masse back to Terra. Alea is the most unusual of the characters. The disillusionment combined with her gifts to see the setting without the effects of the warp make her in many ways the most trustworthy and apt source as the outsider looking in at just how alien the Imperium is in the far future. Combined, these three characters have arcs that intersect with each other all the way up to the climax of the book. In summary, without spoiling the entire thing, we'll touch on elements of how the narrative gets going. It won't be a deep dive of plot resolutions or climaxes. The Emperor's Legion has a Tyron fighting for legislation to pass that would allow for the release of the Custodian Order from their exile in the Imperial Palace. For the first time since the Horus Heresy, they would be out in the galaxy, bringing his will to the wider Imperium and making up for their shameful past. Valerian must investigate why the population on Terra is growing ever more fractious. As more is uncovered, he must also come to terms with his changing role within the Custodes. And lastly, Alea must make the incredibly dangerous voyage back to Terra with information critical to the unfolding events of the book. So who's this book for? Veteran readers of 40k that could fact-check a lore tuber on the standard magazine size for a stalker pattern bolter will be as at home in this dense and richly weaved story as a brand new member of the 401k Miniature Collection Club. Plenty of insights are given through cleverly delivered dialogue and exposition that will inform the new while still providing fresh insight into the setting of 40k for old hands of the lore. There are plenty of references to other books entirely as well, with nods to the Black Legion series by ADB, the Gathering Storm novels, and much, much more. And how much does this book actually offer to a reader? In terms of story, The Emperor's Legion is incredibly packed with lore, with a surprising amount of depth given to the readers and to the Grey Knights, Sisters of Silence, the High Lords, Primarchs, Demons, the Inquisition, the Warp, Assassins, and even the Emperor himself. There's so much this book has to offer that it is a wonder Chris Raitt was able to keep the story from faltering off its smooth pacing. Now, is it a standalone book, or do you have to read something else to understand what's happening in this book? And additionally, how much knowledge does one need to understand what is happening in this book? And I'll take each point one by one. This can absolutely be a standalone book. It does have a sequel, and many of the characters carry forward into the new book. And the sequel deals with consequences of the ending of the first. But the first has a proper resolution, a proper ending. It's not just a cold ending, and then you're just like, part 2 will come on Saturday, and then it just proceeds to keep going. But no, it has a proper ending, and if you stopped and you just never read the second, or you didn't know there was a second, it wouldn't diminish the story at all. As with all Warhammer books, AOS and 40k alike, the more books you read, the more you'll understand about the setting as a whole. That being said, no, there is no homework that need to be done before diving into this book. You can absolutely cold turkey. If you've never read Warhammer at all, you could very much get away with just picking this book up and reading it. There's a lot of exposition in this book, and that does a lot of heavy lifting on catching people up on why the Imperium is the way it is, which is very interesting. That it doesn't seem expository at the same time. It's a very good example of how exposition can be written well and does have a place in a story. So yeah, how much lore does this book have to offer, or is it Warhammer ASMR? So Warhammer ASMR is a term that's entirely made up by me, and what it means, at least why I started using it, is does the story just put you in the setting with all the vibes and terminology that you would expect from a Warhammer book? They don't have any real substance though, and the most, and I'm not bashing on it, but battle tomes, wherein things are happening, there is a story, but it's not like important to the setting, which like in itself are important. Like not every story has to be like, you know, the Cicatrix Maledictum is opening and we must stop. Like there has to be stories like this that, you know, flesh out, pad out, and add life to the setting. So I'm not bashing them. They are absolutely fun reads. Check out the battle tomes. They're super cool. But if you're looking for like, is Sevatar returning? Or like stuff like that, it's not going to be... I'm getting off track. The point is, battle tomes, they're fine, but they are the most, and they aren't the only ones that do this, but they are the most like offensive of being like ASMR, Warhammer ASMR. But anyways, to answer the original question, no, this book is not Warhammer ASMR. It very much has lore, which is putting it mildly, as it's fairly bursting with it. And kind of to cap this one off, that much of what happens throughout this book, and especially how it wraps up, it sets up much of the plots that can still be seen in books being published, like even today. I mean, this, and then the sequel, and then you can read like the Great Work, and then you can start in on the Dark Imperium trilogy, and like you'll see basically a direct line from these 2 books into those 4 books, and you won't be lost, and in fact you'll be kind of following the breadcrumbs. But yeah, the contemporary 40k that we know was kind of set up by the Gathering Storm novels, and as well as like the Watchers of the Throne series, which is what we're talking about today. But that pretty much wraps up the review portion, and the summary portion as well. If you want to click off, go for it. The rest of the video is just going to be things that I wanted to expand on with the book. It's going to be a lot less scripted. I don't know if you could tell, but I was definitely reading off the script. There is still kind of like bullet points. In this case, I have 8. And I don't know, I might throw up like the actual, what I'm calling them as text, and lay stuff out in the video, but who knows? I'm still doing editing. So the first one I'm calling A New Tribune for a New Time. And for those of you who did read the Dark Imperium trilogy, which highly recommend, you should do it. But Cloquan gets made into a Tribune in this book, and in later books, he'll be the custodian assigned by the Captain General Trajan Valoris to observe and protect Guilliman. And the thought process of the Custodes, they've always been complex when it comes to the Primarchs, and it's due to the fact that just their very nature. So, and we'll talk more about this specifically later, but the fallibility of just other people in general, like the way that Custodes are built is just different. Like they abjectly, unless it's very specific circumstances, like you can read the Siege of Terra series and you'll see like hints of ways that you can kind of turn them against even each other, which is wild. But they're from people that are just unbelievably smart, and they've been alive for thousands of years. So making them essentially, unless you're the survivor of like, I don't know, the Selenar, or unless you survived the Age of Strife and you just happen to have all of that knowledge still and capacity, you're not going to be making these guys do anything that isn't in service to the Big E. So they just see the Primarchs as flawed. They also see the Astartes as flawed, just because, like, at the end of the day, they can't betray the Emperor. It's just literally not how that works. And in some ways, it almost makes them come off as, like, trapped or, like, less than human, because there's points where you're like, man, you really just don't have free will. That's crazy. What's that like? And sometimes they see that, but then other times they're just completely oblivious to the fact that they just, like, do not have the capacity to make their own decisions. But yeah, anyways, the way, the mentality towards the Astartes is that they're just superior. But when looking at the two organizations, they're both essentially built to be living weapons. And Valerian actually talks about this in his first chapter. He enters the chapter being like, we're not supposed to be soldiers. And I get it, like, you can be a warrior but not a soldier, but at the same time, he's 9 feet tall. He's versed in, like, every form of combat you can possibly be versed in, and maybe not psychic, because they aren't psychic. So I guess that's one that they're not, but that's what the Sisters of Silence are for. And he's just, like, covered in armor, and he's, like, half as heavy as a tank, and then he's like, we're not supposed to be soldiers. And I'm like, come on, bruh. Like, don't do that. But yeah, so I know that there's so much more than just weapons, and sometimes it's just because of the writing, but they come across as, like, Golden Astartes sometimes, because it's just like, maybe there just isn't enough time to add the nuance of, like, what the custodians actually are. And they're always nuanced because of how they're built, what their actual purpose is. They're meant to be companions to the Emperor, so there is, like, an element of, like, at the end of the day, he wants friends because he's really old and he just needs people around him. So he wanted to, like, talk to these guys. So there has to be they're not Astartes. They have, like, conversational etiquette, and they're not always just comparing bolter sizes. Their conversations stray into the philosophical way more often than not, and it actually kind of just gets on most people's nerves, because a lot of their conversations just seem very trivial most of the time. But yeah, I'm getting off on a tangent. For the Primarchs, they reserve quite a bit of distrust, and it makes sense, all things considered, but there's a scene in Dark Imperium where Cloquan is training to kill Guilliman, and I guess to cap this last point off, I've never heard of a bodyguard that runs actual simulations on how best to kill me. Like, I understand the ideology, because they have blood games where they try and kill the Emperor, and like, sure, they're basically white hat hackers where they're trying to find like flaws in the system, but I've never had like, this is not what that is. This is Kulquan actually being like, man, if I'm gonna kill that guy. Like, Kulquan does not like Gilliman at all. There's like zero trust. There's like an inkling of respect, and there's also just like, Custody got told to do something, so Custody will do thing mentality in him, because like Captain General said do the thing, so he's gonna do the thing. And yeah, I don't know, like, the Custodies and the Primarchs and the Astartes, they will always butt heads, and that, you know, it is what it is. But the next one is The Nature of Humanity. It is a quote, so cover your ears because I don't have a narrator voice, but it goes, coin, power, knowledge, gratification, we are yet animals at heart. Nothing could change that. Not even he could change us, really, though I think he wanted to once. So it's not in this book, but it's in the Siege of Terra novels, and the Emperor and Sanguinius actually have a discussion that parallels what Tyron is kind of positing. And Sanguinius actually asks the Emperor just why he allows humanity, Primarchs included, and Astartes, because, you know, we're all under the umbrella of humanity in grays, but why he hadn't altered things about the human spirit and human nature so that people are less fallible overall. And the Emperor responded, and I'm absolutely paraphrasing, this is not a direct quote, it's just a 17-hour novel, and if I went back and tried to find this quote, it would just take a little bit longer than I want. So, like, don't quote me on it, but this is absolutely in line with what he meant. But he basically says that humanity would slide into stagnant perfection. There would be no progress, only the clean sterility of a guaranteed future that would look the same throughout the ages. And human nature is not necessarily, like, not a necessary ingredient, but in stripping it away from humanity, the result would not be worth fighting for. And to kind of carry on with that, it's my like theory and my headcanon that it's a big reason why I don't think the Emperor saved an STC, because like at the end of the day he's 40-something thousand years old, right? Like Alanius Pius is probably the only guy who's older than him. He's dead, but like maybe not, he's a perpetual, we don't know. Like Horus kind of pink misted him by just running over him, but like Vulcan got vaporized by a volcano and he came back, so maybe Alanius Pius is still alive, we don't know. Yeah, I don't think that somebody that old and omnipotent and powerful looked at the god machine that can create matter or like anything from anything. You can essentially just, the way they're written, they're just wildly powerful machines that you can just like ask a question and it will come up with an answer that is correct. So I don't think he looked at an STC and was like, nah, that's not useful. I think he looked at an STC and he was like, that's not the solution that I want. He also lived through the age of technology, like our golden age in the setting, and I don't think that he liked the humanity that he saw. Like, for better or worse, he's just not taking that route. And I don't know, machines make machine men, and the Emperor is far more human than he knows. So a good kind of insight into the Emperor is like 2 books. One is The Last Church, and the other one, of course, is The Master of Mankind, where you get kind of the most hands-on with the guy. Like, he's always been a nebulous character. He has to be. I don't think there's a way to kind of flesh him out, because just to how complicated he is and how old he is, and just the power level is just so insane. But yeah, the next one that I want to talk about is an Astartes Viewpoint, and it is another quote. So you know the drill. Out of the long habit, virtually unconsciously, I reached a judgment on the fastest method of killing him. I found the optimal results less than a microsecond of effort required to be slightly amusing. Valerian, when he is first introduced to Tyrion, when Tyrion comes to ask with Trajan Valoris, because he's the captain general, and you absolutely need to ask to talk to the guy. So, not much of a spoiler, but like, he does do a lot to eventually get a meeting with Trajan Valoris, and it is just hilarious, to be honest, like how far he goes just to get a conversation with him. But this is something that will pop up in mini books and other media for Warhammer when it comes to transhumans. So in both the Custodes and the Astartes, they're always looking for threats in their environment and with whom they associate. And they do it with each other. They do it with inanimate objects. Like, that is the way they're wired. And I would be too if I was taken at the age of 9 and then all I knew was training and then like going to war, and then like, hundreds of years later I'm still doing the same thing. So like, I get it. It does show what they are at their core though, which is weapons. They are living weapons. I am totally on board with Arkan Land's entire understanding and ideology towards the Astartes. Like, they are by no means humans. Like, I don't mean to like bash the Astartes. They are absolutely like humanity's bulwark against the evil. Like, they're super cool. They have that going for them, but like, they can't, I mean, save for a couple of chapters that do make art, but like, Arkan Land basically states that Astartes can't contribute meaningfully to human experience. Like, they don't do it. Like, killing them is basically like breaking a gun. It's not that big of a deal, which is like really harsh to say, but on the other hand, the Astartes, with help of Primarch, but the Astartes are the ones that kind of screwed everything up for everybody. So, I mean, if you take that backwards, then it's like, well, Erebus was actually the dick. But then even further back, it's like, well, the Emperor was the one that did the... So, like, And then the Selenar in... I forgot which book it is. But they have a conversation with one of the Space Marines, and there's a really good kind of quote where the Astartes kind of... It's not mocking, but like, they're confused as to why the Selenar are like so hesitant to give, or were, this is past tense, they definitely did, this happens after the fact, but why the Selenar hesitated so much and had so much pushback to just giving the Emperor what he wanted. And they responded with like, because essentially the Astartes was like, hey, we've always fought. Like, humanity is warlike. What do you, like, why not just give the Emperor what he wants? Because it's not like you're changing things. And the Selenar responded with, like, humans have always been warlike, but we've always had a human capacity. And when you give the Emperor superhumans, now we have a superhuman capacity for war. And look how that turned out. And it's like, this is this is like during the heresy, but this is like during the climax of the heresy. And that quote just kind of really hit hard, because I was like, yeah, I mean, you guys really kind of shattered the galaxy. But yeah, so the next one is my first Ackchually moment, and it's the Black Legion's name. Like, this is as pedantic as it gets. And yeah, like, it's literally the actual title. And Alea, in the way the setting is written, is like, everybody's a varying degree of like a bad narrator, right? Like someone who you can't really trust what they say, because there's one of three things going on, or all three, or two combined. We don't know. But like, either they don't know what they're talking about, because they just don't know, or they're outright lying, like they're obfuscating the truth. If a demon says something, probably take that with a pinch of salt, unless you have like 4 or 5 corroborating sources and quotes that you're just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. and then the other one is like just the way that time changes things. Like, I don't know if you guys have read enough 30k and then started reading 40k and was just like, wow, something's different with the writing. They kind of did that on purpose. Like, the 30k writing kind of comes off as a lot more matter of fact. People generally have more of a sense of what's going on. They're more educated, etc., etc. Like, and then 40k, it's like different. Myths are basically like history to them. Like, they don't, it's not that they don't know their history, they're taught it. It's just they're taught it differently. But again, I'm getting off on a huge tangent that probably has its own video, or some other guy has already done it. But anyway, that's my 10 cents on like how the 40k setting is written. But it also kind of defends like Alea's position on this, but she says like the Black Legion named themselves, and they didn't. In the Legion Wars that occurred in the Eye of Terror after the Scouring, so they were banished to the Eye of Terror. The Cicatrix Maledictum has not always been a thing. It is a relatively new thing in the setting, considering that the setting is like 38 years old. And the Cicatrix has only been around for like 8-ish years now. But yeah, so they were banished to the Eye of Terror, and then the Legion Wars happened, and Abaddon, as everyone knows, he eventually rose and formed what would become known as the Black Legion. And it would have its first major victory, destroying Canticle City, a major Emperor's Children stronghold at the time. And in the beginning, Black Legion was actually meant scornfully by the other legions. It was a title that was meant to say that they were part of no legion at all. Because to like kind of add context to that, essentially the Black Legion was made up of what's left of the Sons of Horus, because obviously the Horus Heresy did not end well for the traitors, and all the other legions just kind of ganged up on the Sons of Horus that were left and tried to basically annihilate them from existence. It didn't work. I mean, it did a very good job of working, but it didn't actually. Yeah, what's left of them, kind of, when Abaddon finally came back out of his own, just kind of like, I don't really want to deal with this. I'm my own guy. I don't even want to be a part of the Legion. He essentially made his own. So the first people that joined, well, not all of them, but as a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure none of the first members of the Black Legion were actually Sons of Horus, except for the Terminators. But yeah, like after the first members, most of them were Sons of Horus, and they are now still. But the tag-alongs are cast-offs, or Astartes that just don't want to be part of their own legions anymore. So yeah, originally Black Legion was not like a cool thing. It was like slander, I guess. But yeah, so, shows how badly they can insult each other, I guess. But yeah. Number 5 is Inquisitors on the High 12. So inquisitorial representatives that sit on the High Lords of Terra do not mean that they're higher in the internal organization of the actual Inquisition. So those Inquisitors that sit on the council are just there to represent the face of the Inquisition on those matters that require it. They are still Inquisitors and act with an inquisitorial remit. To be put on the council, they will be voted on by other Inquisitors, and if they want to be off the council, they can either step down once a replacement is found, or be voted off with a replacement given by a group of Inquisitors. So a great book that actually goes over this very thing is Our Martyred Lady by Gav Thorpe. I only recommend it because it's like phenomenal, but also it's only like 5 hours. It's a short story. Another much higher investment, which, like, if you've got 17 hours to kill, I hope you have 2 more sets of 17 hours to kill, because the Beast Arises series has a lot. of like inquisitorial nonsense on the High 12 that happens. But again, it is a relatively old series, and also it's a huge time investment. So I would not say like, yeah, just take an afternoon off, listen to this novel. But yeah, anyway, Martyred Lady by Gapthorpe, great read, highly recommend. Anyone that thinks that the short stories don't have like much punch as the longer ones, read The First Lord of the Imperium. It will change, especially if you're an old hand at the lore and you just like never got around to reading it, or if you've never heard of it, just read it. Like, it's 30 minutes long. And the implication is just enormous. So like I cannot like overstate how important that book is. But yeah, so Untapped Emotional Potential is the next segment I kind of wanted to expand on, and this was an interesting one. So Valerian is fighting, as one does, because it's 40k, and he comments, duty, commitment, and resolve, emotions and feelings that do not feed into the warp. And I bring this up because there's been a lot of conversations that I've seen on like forums and like YouTube channels and just people at the hobby shop that I play at, and I've heard that like talk about the fifth chaos god basically, and like the obvious, after you get over like the cool factor of like, wow, a fifth chaos god, but then the follow-up question is like, what would that even look like? Because the big four kind of have all of them, so it's kind of hard to imagine duty, commitment, and resolve like making a god, like, not only because the emotions aren't exactly fundamental to human existence, but also that god would just be like, what even would that look like? Duty, commitment, I don't know, use your imagination, I guess. But just a thought. I seriously doubt that another chaos god would form from those states of being or those emotions. And if there is going to be a fifth, then just like bring back Malal. Just do that. Like, or Malice, I guess is his actual real name. Sorry, I've never read an AOS book, but I'm still getting corrupted by its knowledge. The Last Loyal Legion is number 7, and Hematalian calls the Custodes the Emperor's Legion, which is an interesting word choice, and they aren't part of the original 20 legions, but he's just referencing them because they are technically legion. So there's 10,000 of them, which is huge. So a chapter is split into 1,000 Marines, and if you're Codex compliant, that's where you stay. There's a lot of chapters that aren't Codex compliant. I mean, there is the official loophole, because the most famous example of this is definitely the Black Templars, but they're legal, like they don't actually have to hide the fact that they have like a bajillion of themselves. If you say you're on crusade, you are not capped by that number. So they have a bunch of crusader fleets because they don't even have a homeworld anymore, and they just have way more than 1,000, and they have a huge fleet. And every time the Administratum tries to kind of like catalog all of it, they're just like, there's a lot, we don't know, they're everywhere, they just constantly move around. They're also like fervently loyal, so nobody's sitting there going like, oh yeah, they're gonna turn against us. It's just not happening. But yeah, so aside from a select few legions, which you absolutely understand who they are the single biggest, outside of the Astra Militarum, but in the transhumans, they are the single biggest like military weapon that the Imperium still owns, and they answer to one guy. So, and he answers to one guy. But anyway, I just thought that was interesting. Primarchs Manifesting their aspect, and this will round us out. This will be my last point. And it goes like this. He looked different from how he had been before. His navel face was lined now as if rapid aging had somehow taken place. When I had first encountered him, he had looked like a prince, full of furious energy. Now he had a grizzled aspect of a warrior king, a monarch weighed down by understanding, no doubt terrible. So this is particularly interesting. This book was published back in 2017. Gilliman was the first Primarch that came back, and it was just so novel that people were just kind of like, cool, he's back. I wonder why he's old. He was in stasis. And then we just like moved on and forgot. But then in Lion, Son of the Forest, when he comes back, he's also significantly older. And specifically, these two should not be older because they were both in like levels of stasis. So you just like, yeah, aging can happen, but like not in that way and not that quickly and not if you're in stasis. So my theory is that they can, and this is not like, I came up with this in a vacuum. It's like, no, like I watch Sandman of Terra every so often, and also like Luton and some other like lore tubers, and yeah, like what they say makes sense, in that their dad is constantly changing his aspect. He's a master at it. Literally nobody can look at the Emperor and see the same thing. If you have a soul, it's not happening. Like the Sisters of Silence are probably the only ones that can look at the Emperor and be like, aha, I know what you look like. But they don't really find it within themselves to tell anybody else. They don't even find it important enough to speak about. So, like there's a few throwaway lines that they've said sometimes where it's just like, oh, I see an old man on a throne and he looks weary, and that's like it. And this is like like he wasn't just a corpse on a throne. Like this was back when he was like a normal dude, as normal as like the Big E can really be. But yeah, so we kind of understand that he's just like a chill dude, of average looking averageness, like from the few lines we've gotten from Sisters of Silence. But like if you're just, one of the plebs that have a soul, then you're going to be seeing any one of a number of things. But that's not the point. When it comes to the Primarchs, especially the Lion and Gilliman, I think that they just have a subconscious ability to change their aspect depending on like how much stress they're in. And both of them are under immense levels of stress. So yeah, that's pretty much, that's going to cap it off for me. I really appreciate if you've made it all the way to the end of the video. I hope this was, something. Yeah, until next time, I hope it's in a week, but see you around.